everybody for the continuance of our annual plan hearing and our last group of submitters for the day. So I would like to please welcome up Pauline Doyle from Guardians of the Aquifer.
What's the problem?
He's inhaling his water.
Excuse me.
That one.
Fuck your mate. He don't hear him.
I've got my own water from Whakatū.
Oh,
Hey,
welcome, Pauline.
I don't need to be in front of that. Sorry. Thank you. Are you 10 minutes starting now?
10 minutes starting now.
Okay. Well, first I want to say yes, we definitely need an independent water regulator. The problem in August 2016 was that Hastings District Council ignored repeated requests by the local water regulator to raise bore heads above ground after the 1998 outbreak in Havelock North. For years, the impotent water regulator, the DHB, had let them get away with it. And the rest of us are now paying a high price for that incompetence. In 2017, Napier copied Hastings and chlorinated our water supply. Coffee-coloured water immediately started flowing from taps in thousands of households. You all know about that problem. That was coming from the bore in Coverdale Street, I understand. We all know now, or should know, that chlorine oxidises with the minerals in our mineral water. But by the end of next month, end of June, the first of 2 replacement bores should be up and running. Finally, the council might have solved the so-called dirty water problem. If it works, thank you. If it doesn't work, thank you. You kept your promise. You investigated thoroughly the Dutch system for providing safe, chlorine-free water. With Napier's unique mineral water, we're already halfway there. And now it's time to survey the community. So we're asking you to test the support for continuing to work towards a network that could be chlorine-free, and to test the support for a regional Hawke's Bay entity retaining ownership and managerial control of our assets in Napier. Most people are not aware in Napier that the Hawke's Bay model for 3 waters has already been operating for 5 years. The Hawke's Bay Water Governance Group was set up by Justice Stevens in December 2016. It comprised initially Hastings District Council, the Regional Council and the DHB. By mid-2017, Napier City Council joined this regional group along with Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa. The 4 local councils have been collaborating for 5 years to ensure they provide safe drinking water and develop better systems for dealing with sewage and stormwater, our 3 waters. The list of work that I'm aware of that Napier City Council has achieved, guided by this Hawke's Bay model, includes 3 Napier bores were abandoned, the rest were upgraded, the bore heads were raised where necessary, protection zones were established around each bore, land was bought for new reservoirs for Napier, and a leak detection program, most important, was started in 2020 and should be completed by the end of this year. And this will provide accurate data to the council to determine any replacement of the pipe network. Also, the Coverdale bore with the dirty water issues has been closed, I understand, and 2 new replacement bores will soon be operational. Back in 2019, the Department of Internal Affairs, which has been driving this whole thing since August 2016, they saw Hawke's Bay as a potential model for other regions, but unfortunately the Minister, Nanaia Mahuta, talks about the huge amounts of water leaking from council pipes and huge rates rises to try and fix it. And she constantly uses an estimate of 30% water leakage. I don't know where she got that from. I suspect Water New Zealand. However, according to calculations that the Napier City Council engineers have just done a couple of weeks ago, the figure is more like 12.7%, nowhere near the 30% estimate used by the Minister. And the council engineers base these results from the leak detection program, which has already completed a third of Napier's network. The actual figure for leakage from the council pipes could be even lower than the 12.7% if you exclude leaks from private property. The Dutch system has a guideline of 5% leakage maximum. We are getting there. I'm pretty impressed with what Napier City Council has achieved in the last 3 years. The weirdest of all the weird ideas from the government is this one, that councils will become shareholders of one of the new water entities, with 1 share being allocated to each council for every 50,000 people within their territory. That means Napier will end up with 1 share. That's a very tiny voice. I would hate to see us go down that track. And I'm not going to give up speaking out until it's a dead duck. And it's not a dead duck yet. Then there's the issue of potential price gouging by the new monopolies. The Commerce Minister has asked for a watchdog regulator to protect consumers. Last year in the Dominion Post, I saw a report that MB has warned of potential price gouging, pointing out that, quote, the scale of the water entities and the absence of competition means there are significant risks that the entities do not act in the long-term interests of consumers, unquote. So I have asked the Minister, Dr. David Clark, for an update. In conclusion, I just want to say, like Christchurch, we are aiming for exemption from mandatory chlorination, promised by the government early on. The Hawke's Bay Three Waters model, it seems to us, is our best chance of going chlorine-free. You kept your promise, the government did not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. And just an initial question from me. As part of your submission, you are seeking support from council to actually, or for council to run a survey of the community.
Yeah.
And just wanting to clarify, you're asking for that to cover 2 components, aren't you? Sort of an opportunity to provide feedback on the proposed Three Waters reform, and also another check-in with our community that chlorine-free is still the desired
The
pathway.
2 things.
The
Yeah.
2 things.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On Three Waters reform, it's crucial that it's about the Hawke's Bay model. I don't think very many people in Hawke's Bay or in Napier are aware that we've had that model we've been operating under for 5 years. I mean, councils have been just carrying on what they normally do anyway, but there's been collaboration. There's been a bit more sharing of problems and ways to resolve them.
Thank you. I'll open up to councillors for any questions that you may have. Councillor Bowe.
Thank you, Pauline. One of the key elements of the government's Three Waters reform proposal is the co-governance model. And I'm wondering if Guardians of Aquifer has got a position on that, and if Guardians of the Aquifer, in fact, are partners with mana whenua, local tangata whenua, on your main kaupapa.
We've focused totally on pursuing the Hawke's Bay model. Full stop. Don't need to discuss who owns water or who owns the human waste that goes through the water pipes, the sewage pipes. All of that is for future submissions to the government. We're totally focused, Maxine,
Chlorine.
on the Hawke's,
Oh, sorry.
not just chlorine-free, but the Hawke's Bay model that we've been operating under for the last 5 years. We've not been operating under, we've been collaborating. I prefer to call it collaboration. Quite different from the government proposal and all its, yeah.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Pauline, thank you very much for your very well thought out and researched submission. I know that you do a lot of conversation and lobbying with the ministers, and you mentioned a couple in your submission. I'm just wondering from Guardians of the Aquifer's perspective, have you had any positive engagement back from the government on the proposed reform?
No.
Thank you.
Next question.
Are there any further questions? No. Thank you so much for your time, Pauline, and yes, clearly the time and effort that's been put into your submission. I know you know this inside out now, so we do appreciate your continued commitment to this. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate hearing that. I don't need much encouragement.
I would now like to welcome Jock McIntosh from the Mitre 10 Sports Park, please.
Larry Blair. Larry. Down at the beach.
Welcome, Jock.
Kia ora koutou, and thanks for having us. Look, I spoke to you a few months back and you've had the paper, so you probably don't want to hear too much more from me. I've got Lance on my left and Craig also. Lance is the recently appointed, I'm pleased to say, CE of Central Districts Cricket. And Craig does fantastic stuff with Giants Boxing. So I'll just ask them to speak very briefly and then I'll just update you on where we're at with the building. So maybe Craig, if you could kick things off for us.
Yeah, no trouble. Wonderful. Hey, thank you for having us over here. And when I say over here, just in Hawke's Bay, what a wonderful place. Look, the privilege for me to be able to speak regarding the Mitre 10 Park and the funding that Jock will discuss in a moment for your input to the building is because we're interested in people. So I run under the Hawke's Bay Youth Trust, I run the Hastings Giants Boxing Academy, but I'm also here representing Hawke's Bay Boxing. And the reason that we use boxing is just a vehicle to help young people and their whānau live lives they value. So from a boxing perspective, in the last 10 years that we've been running it since we founded Flaxmere Boxing in 2012, then broke away to widen it under the Hawke's Bay Youth Trust to Hastings Giants back in 2015, to now the extension of Havelock North Saints last year, and what will soon to be, first time announced actually, will be the Napier Dodgers in Onikawa there with one of our long-time serving coaches, Dean Moss. So really exciting in regards to that, but having a central spot for Hawke's Bay Boxing to be able to bring children up, and we work from the ages of 8, and dare I say, children when I talk about up to 40, because people are still needing a whole lot of love and support around that. One of our first quotes that we talked about, no matter your talent nor your adversity, it's your attitude that determines your altitude. And we work with our young people and their whānau to find out what it is that they want, and then we supply it and provide it. And we have this wonderful community that can do that. A simple story would be a young Tongan man, I won't share his name, but his kids are now boxing within the academy, having their first matches. And we've dealt with them in their schools with good behaviour, etc. But also, he started boxing wanting to be a fighter, as everyone comes wanting to be a fighter, but such a small percentage do. In fact, I think it's only 10% that actually compete out of our academy, of the 140 that are benefited. And this young Tongan man has then, within a year, changed his attitude to being, I'd love to buy a house. And so now he owns a house, a 2-bedroom house in Flaxmere. I think they're about to have their 5th child, so we're working with him to find a bigger house. But we'll do anything. We have the WIT attitude, which is a whatever it takes kind of process. And so by moving to the sports park and having a home, there's this wonderful book called Belongings, written by Owen Eastwood, a New Zealand guy who travels the world discussing the importance of whenua, the importance of the Te Wharu Tapu Whā model, and how we can create that in high performance, but how we create that in life. And so the real belonging and foundation is what we're trying to create with this building, because once we've got a place to belong, we can believe in ourselves and then become what we need to do. And so that's the journey that we're on. We have a large team doing that. And whilst I don't want to steal all this time from these good men, I need you to know that our people, like you, love our people. And so our job as a community provider is to serve them in a way that they can live a life that they value. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thanks, mate. Lance.
Yeah, just on behalf of Central Districts Cricket, we're pretty excited about what we've got going on at the moment. So, and excited about the relationship we're going to have with the Giants Boxing moving forward as well, in the joint venture there. Just to give you a bit more perspective, we're also building a self-funded retractable roof greenhouse out at the sports park in Hastings, which will be more of a high-performance facility there. So that'll cater for our first-class and identified players, whereas this indoor cricket facility, having been someone that's come through the system over a number of years, last quarter of a decade, there's not been any sort of dedicated indoor training facility here in the Hawke's Bay or in the one in Napier at Whitmore Park is definitely well below par. There's people in the room around here that we've had discussions with in the past around how we can sort of make that a bit more fit for purpose. But it's just so tired and run down. Balls don't bounce and things like that, and so it's really hard to get the kids involved and engaged in the game in a subpar facility. So this indoor cricket centre will be state of the art, brand new. Obviously exciting for us to be able to run school holiday programs and things like that, and it'll be very much a community-based project throughout the day in the low user periods. Our guys will go in there if it's available and stuff like that, but mainly purely and simply as a community-based project for the kids coming through the system to develop their game and get involved in our summer sport. So we're really excited about what's going on at the sports park, and also with the relationship that we're gonna have with Giants Boxing as well through this process.
Thanks, Lance. So just briefly, some graphics of where we're at with the building. This is the Giants Boxing part of it. So it's this end of it is 600 square metres of purpose-built space for boxing. So it's a big area, and it's going to be fitted out exactly as to their requirements. And it doesn't look like it, but these were taken a couple of days ago, incidentally. This is the cricket part of it. So that is a 55-metre long stretch. It'll be 4 indoor lanes for cricket. So again, pretty good facility for them. And finally, a summary of where we're at, really. This is in the paper, and so our request was for 100K. It's about a 2.4 million build. It's been the most fluid thing I've been involved in since I've been there in terms of cost increases and that sort of thing. And the rationale really is what Craig and Lance have described. The cricket part of it is in addition to what Whitmore Park caters for, this will cater for an additional 400 kids. And the sort of social good that evolves out of boxing is the other summary reason why we're having a conversation with you. But probably most is the last one there. There's a good chunk of Napier people going to be using both those things. We think about 40% in cricket's case, and it will evolve into about 30% of boxing users will be based here. So thank you very much, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much to all three of you. I'll open up to councillors for any questions. Councillor Bogue.
Thank you very much for your presentation. One of the suggestions that came from Sport Hawke's Bay today was that we do another regional facilities review. The last one was done in 2015, because one of the issues we're faced with is that, you know, needs arise and the means to deliver meet those needs aren't there. So we get submissions for very worthy requests for facilities. But are you supportive of that if we had a regional facility review, but a bit of a stock take on what we've got, what the needs are and what we will need in the future, that things like this would be able to come to us perhaps in our long-term plan?
No, we're most definitely supportive. We're doing a mini version of that ourselves, which Napier's involved in, which is a review of what the park's going to look like in 10 years' time, and Glenn Lucas is helping us with that. From a region-wide perspective, believe it or not, it makes it a lot easier for us. I've sort of no interest in having a scrap over whether it should be in Napier or Hastings or whatever. We just want it where the sport wants it. So, yeah, supportive of that.
Oh, thanks. Any further questions? No. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and talk to us today. Next, we have James Taylor from Equal Rights Hawke's Bay. Welcome, James.
Thank you. Okay. Jimmy Carter once said, "The experience of democracy is like the experience of life itself. Always changing, infinite in its variety, sometimes turbulent, and all the more valuable for having been tested in adversity." Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is James Taylor, and I'm representing Equal Rights Hawke's Bay. Today, I'll be addressing the submission we have made, seeking a democratic services review of the council processes. Who is Equal Rights Hawke's Bay? A mix of people, vaccinated and unvaccinated, without any religious or political agenda, unhappy about the divide the government has created with the use of My Vaccine Pass. We do not take a stance on vaccination. We are pro-choice and support people whichever choice they make. We do not support discrimination and division. There are many things that I want to talk about that had serious impacts on a group of people following the Napier City Council's adoption of the My Vaccine Pass that excluded this group from paid-for public facilities. But I am having to talk about something a lot more fundamental, our democratic process. Our submission is asking that there is a democratic services review of the process undertaken where there is any exclusion of a group of people. The CEO should not hold the sole authority to decide to exclude any group of people from any of its facilities or services. The Council's recent decision to require the My Vaccine Pass for publicly owned facilities was made by the CEO and did not need to go through public consultation or through councillors. The choice to exclude a group of people from council facilities should go through a more democratic and transparent process. This process should start with public consultation, giving people the opportunity to talk to their feedback, then pass through to councillors to vote on. Whilst this process is happening, everyone should be treated equally and no changes implemented. This is our submission. Decisions that impact on people being able to equally participate in society must go through a democratic process. So what brought me here today? Well, as stated in our submission, it was the CEO's ability to unilaterally decide to exclude people without a transparent process or consultation. We acknowledge that the CEO was working within her powers as it's classed as a health and safety issue, but there has been little transparency of information on why the CEO decided that the government traffic light system requirements were not sufficient especially as there were around 15 other councils who did not require a My Vaccine Pass. This decision affected over 3,500 of your constituents. Once this decision was made, Napier City Council turned off comments on social media and gave a template reply when most emailed through in with complaints or concerns. Napier City Council and councillors, you have ignored some of your people. You did not respond. As much as my heart wants to stand here and ask for accountability for what happened, it's best to focus on moving forward and work towards not making the same mistakes. We know that as part of governance, you need to distance yourself from the day-to-day management of council, and as such, a line must be drawn between what is management and what is governance. But this situation is unprecedented. This should not have been treated as day-to-day operations. It is not just a health and safety decision. When the CEO makes a decision that is discriminatory in nature, for whatever reason, it needs to be decided through a democratic process. This should always have been a governance issue. This submission, again, is about good democratic process. If the council went through a fair democratic process, the end decision to bring in the My Vaccine Pass may have been the same. But at least you would have given the people a fair and proper process, you would have given them dignity and enhanced social cohesion. But by leaving such important decisions to management, you are abdicating your authority that you were given when you were voted in. You would be denying dignity to some of your constituents, and when you do this, you undermine this social cohesion. The Local Government Act 2002, Section 14, online it states how councils should make decisions, conducting their business in a clear, transparent, and democratically accountable way, making themselves aware of and having regard to the views of all their communities. Again, this is all about good process. Those without a My Vaccine Pass are not the only ones with a viewpoint on this topic, but excluding groups of people without transparency and consultation or even providing space for reasonable feedback is undemocratic. Moving forward, if and when a process of consultation is happening to exclude a group of people, everyone should be treated equally, and no changes implemented that affect only some groups. It is really important that once a full democratic process is complete, only then should any groups of people be excluded. So what now? As people, you may not have personally agreed with others' choices, but that should not stop a fair democratic process happening. Take a step back and look at this objectively from all angles. Please, uphold the foundations of democracy and make these changes. To end, Indira Gandhi once said, "Every democratic system evolves its own conventions. It is not only the water, but the banks which make the river." Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, James. I'll open up for councillors for any questions that you may have. No,
Just one through you, Your Worship.
Councillor Tapney.
My question is around, currently there's a piece of work happening at central level called the Future for Local Government Review, which is looking at whether or not the democratic model we currently have could do with some tweaking or major overhauling. Will you and your collective be submitting to that process as well?
Quite possibly. Yep.
Councillor McGrath.
It's just through the chair, just a couple of questions. You commented about the need for consultation. Considering the government was changing the rules every couple of days, how would you perceive that a council would go and consult with, say, 60,000 residents? And how long do you think that would take to do properly?
Not sure, to be honest. For me, it's more just highlighting that I felt that what did happen wasn't okay and the process wasn't sufficient.
Yeah. Okay, and secondly, you're saying is equal rights, is it?
Yes.
So when we develop things as a council, when we build a set of steps, is that okay, equal rights, or do we need to build ramps for disabled people as well, or is it just one? Where do you sit on all of that? I'm just not sure where your equal rights start and stop, because not everyone starts off on the same footing, for a better term.
Yeah, fair enough. And for us, we started informed when the government talked about bringing in the vaccine passport, as we saw that it was going to create two classes of citizens, and we weren't okay with that. So that's kind of been our primary focus, is around that equality and that.
Okay, so just along those sides. Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
No further questions, and I guess just to sort of tease out Councillor McGrath's comment there, and for your information, James, typically in a normal consultation process that we undertake, which is all legislated in terms of what we are required to do, sort of your minimum time frame would be 3 months for us to work through the process that's legislated for us. And I guess what it does highlight that in times like this, which are unprecedented, our legal framework that we're required to work within is very constraining, and it may well be, as Councillor Tapani has pointed out, that we do as a nation need to have a look at how some of these frameworks and processes are mapped out to ensure perhaps we do have more agility at times, because we certainly don't have it at the moment, unfortunately. So thank you very much, James, for your submission today. Appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to us.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
And I'd now like to call on Michelle Lucas from CCS Disability, please.
Lucky last for the day by the looks of it.
Yes.
So kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Michelle Lucas, and I'm here today on behalf of CCS Disability Action, and my role is Access Coordinator for Te Waifuri Hawke's Bay. Just to bring you up to speed, you probably spoke at the long-term submissions, but just in case. So CCS Disability Action is an organisation that supports disabled people and advocates for their inclusion in our community. And accessibility is a major focus for our organisation, and we have a nationwide network of coordinators who work with local government as well as relevant industries and organisations to improve accessibility. So we have founded LifeMark, which certifies and promotes universal design standards for residential dwellings. And we have developed ways to collect data on access, including measuring accessible journeys project and the street accessibility audits. And Barrier Free New Zealand is a division of CCS Disability Action and also provides opportunities for the commercial sector and local government to improve accessibility through the provision of technical support and through providing education and the utilisation of universal design. So in our submission to Council, we have highlighted key areas which present opportunities to improve accessibility and to remove barriers that affect residents and visitors to our city from fully enjoying and participating in our community. And access and accessibility in the context of our submission means people's ability to use environments, services and products on an equal basis with others. And access barriers can be attitudinal, informational or physical. So in the interest of working with Council and offering solutions on behalf of the people that we support and the disabled community in general, I wanted to highlight the following points for consideration in respect to the 2022-23 annual plan. This sort of obviously, there's a disability strategy that's been relaunched last year, and then there was a little bit of work done around the key priorities and actions that we're hoping to achieve, and we're sort of getting close to the end of that, 2023. But I've been linking in with various council members and different departments around trying to do some work in the space, and it's really awesome to see that we've got the mobility parking review about to launch soon, so that's going to be huge positive opportunity to make some good changes in that space. But what I've been finding a little bit problematic is I guess it's the funding. There isn't actually any funding allocated to achieve the priorities at the moment, so whether council can consider setting aside some funds so the various departments can link into that and just sort of get some of these objectives underway, especially considering the time frame involved, would be really hugely beneficial. And that would just sort of tie us over until sort of the criteria and the actions are sort of embedded into council policy, so and you're thinking about maybe something like a playground upgrade, all these criteria, universal design is budgeted right from the start, and it's just business as usual. But until that sort of culture and I guess those systems are embedded, it's sort of, if there was a fund that the various departments could tap into, that'd be really neat to see some progress in that space. So food for thought. I know it's pretty tough with moving funds around, but even if there's something there for, you know, for example, Glenn Lucas and the team there to jump in and get these hoists for the Onikawa pools, etc. underway, yeah, I guess it goes across all the different departments. If there was something that they could just tap into to get that underway, that would be great. Something that's been really neat to see in another area is the Tauranga Council developed a fund that was accessible for the public to make use of, and that was to get some really cool initiatives underway that are led by the community in terms of improving accessibility. And it'd be really neat if Napier City Council could look at possibly getting something similar off the ground. I know that's probably would have fallen a little bit more to the long-term plan in respect of the financial planning around that, but if there's any room to get something up and running, if not this year, next year, that would be great, because there'd be some really neat projects that would come out of it. You saw the Rotary group speak this morning around the accessible playground, and that was something that we linked into more from a accessibility point of view, just to give the students some guidance. But it's really neat to see something like that underway in the community, and if there was a fund that people could apply to make use of, to kind of explore making accessible hotspots, and that would be really cool to see. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. And something else that I just kind of wanted to bring to light was housing falls outside of the strategy, but it's really important and affects a huge amount of our population for different reasons in the community. If there's a lack of housing that meets their needs, then that's a big concern with the ageing population. So I just wanted to encourage Napier City Council to explore some different ideas or strategies to improve our housing stock, especially with universally designed homes in mind going forward. So happy to facilitate any conversations with LifeMark, because I think it's something we really need to take quite seriously in our planning going forward. But yeah, that's pretty much me. It's mostly in my submission, but yeah, I've been really enjoying working with council and just supporting everything that's going on with the strategy. So yeah, just thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I'm trying to just sort of get a little bit of clarity around some of you've got your recommendations about having an established fund, say for community groups to be able to access. Do you have any guidance in terms of it? And I guess in an ideal world, I'm sure it would be a huge amount of money, but what would be too small of amount for it not to be meaningful in any way? You know, what would be a reasonable quantum to be able to achieve some decent outcomes?
I guess with Tauranga, they set aside $400,000 a year, which is, that could get quite a few projects underway. That might be an installation of a beach mat in the Ahuriri foreshore. It might be improving the accessibility to a cultural, historical place of significance. It might just be whether the curb cutouts are improved or just the pathways, a little bit of concreting instead of loose gravel. And it would just really be up to the community to highlight what projects could be of good value, and it's just another means to get some momentum in this space, and it's not all led by the council. It's something that we can take some ownership on, the disabled community themselves, and highlight certain areas that need some focus. And a lot of what can happen is quite inexpensive, so it's just providing some opportunities in a different way instead of it all coming through council, I guess. And I guess in Tauranga have done quite a good job of it. They've sort of put, and probably the first year doing that, so there'll be some good findings that will come out of it, but there's been a big focus from my team up in that way to improve historical sites of significance and cultural spaces. So yeah, that's quite neat to see that underway. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Michelle. It was an excellent submission. I was very impressed with it, and I really liked the way you included papers, case study from other local territorial authorities. So I just see very obvious synergies between the disability strategy and the positive ageing strategy. And I'm wondering if that's something you'd thought about working in partnership with. We do have a group that's working on that. Not all older people are disabled and not all disabled people are older, but many of the things you've suggested would also be, I'm sure, recommended by people working on the positive ageing strategy as well.
It's something, I guess, when we're advocating for universal design, it's for everybody. So even though I sit here representing CCS Disability Action and the disabled people that we support, what we're advocating for really is an all-encompassing for sort of elderly, young families. So there is definitely synergy with the two groups. So I, in Hastings, sit on both groups, so I will try and look at doing that here in Napier as well and supporting these initiatives going forward.
Any further questions? Thank you very much for your submission, Michelle, and taking the time to come and speak to us today.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
Right, so that does bring us to the end of our submissions, and we will head straight into deliberations since we've only been back a little while from our lunch break. I do have quite an extensive list of the items which weren't specifically part of the consultation document, so I thought we'd work our way through that list initially. And we'll kick off with funding requests. And the first one on my list is the Chinese Language Week submission, requesting $2,000 to support Chinese Language Week initiatives, and a video of support from myself, which I have already committed to providing. So I would just open up for councillors for views on providing $2,000 for this nationwide campaign for Chinese Language Week. Which we could direct them to apply to our community grants fund as opposed to it being annual plan funding.
Great solution.
Yeah.
Can I just make a comment? I think it sounds like a great idea. It's not a lot of money. The bit that's missing for me is the local link with the Chinese Association, the Multicultural Association, who presumably would be delivering something in tandem with this national week. I think also if the organisation does apply for contestable funding from us, we will be seeking information about how they will link it in with local leaders, with local groups who would hopefully be able to help deliver some of what they're planning. That's just my concern.
Question for council officers, if you're in a position to answer it. And with our community development grant fund, is there a requirement there for that to be for a local initiative?
Yeah, pretty sure.
You would
have to ask Natasha.
Yeah, sure.
Kia ora. I thought I'd sit beside Adele for this bit. We'll just need to get a quick question off to Natasha and get back to you during deliberations.
Okay.
Thanks. Darren, are you able to do that? Thank you.
They've applied before, Your Worship, so I'm pretty sure last time that was the answer, but we'll get that answer properly.
Okay. Okay. Oh, well, we'll park that one while we establish that criteria. So next up we have the Maira 10 Park and a request for $100,000 towards the Cricket and Boxing Centre. And the suggestion has been that we could use our council project fund, which would take up, if we were to support the $100,000, that is the total balance of our council project fund. I personally am quite keen to support this regional facility, however not to the tune of $100,000, because that would be using up all of that project fund. So I would be happy to support in the vicinity of between 30 and 50,000, subject to other views around the table.
Question, please, through you, Madam Chair. The $100,000 per annum, is that till the end of this financial year? And if so, how much of it's been used? Or would this require us, the 100,000 require us to use up all of our next financial year's funds?
It's next financial year's funds. This year's are already totally committed. Councillor Mawson.
Through you, Your Worship, yeah, I certainly support something to be done, and you've put out a rough guesstimate, and I guess I support that. Pending other people wanting to apply, I guess, and making sure that not all the money's gone. 30 to 50 is probably not a bad, number.
Councillor Price.
I support it to a minimal amount, what you're saying, 30 to 50, and maybe it opens the door that we do work with each other on regional facilities. Do I need to say any more?
No.
Thank you.
Just another
Councillor
question.
Crystal.
Sorry.
And then you.
I support it. I know this projects fund, I think it's a minimum of 30,000 that we have to give.
It is, yes.
Yeah. So that vicinity and exactly what Councillor Price said, I think it's we can lead the way in being regionally together.
Councillor Bogue, did you have a question?
Yes, what is the criteria, what are the criteria for the projects for this project fund? How is it decided?
Through you, Madam Mayor, this fund in particular is domiciled to council for projects they wish to fund, so really it's up to you. It's deliberately loose so that you can decide what the need of the day.
Councillor McGrath.
Yeah, you might be surprised here. As much as I love sport, I prefer to spend our money in our own backyard. I think having been to the Bridge Club the other day and watching them telling us how their expenses have gone up, if not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, they may wish to come and see us. PGA, I think their costs are going up every day on our back doorstep. Hopefully we'll be in a position to help more there. And, we hummed and hawed of what we would do in the Centennial Hall because we had no money. And we backed it down to just doing lights and the floor. So, I prefer to spend our money on our facilities locally that need upgrading.
And so I guess to elaborate from my perspective, this is a regional facility. We were told that the boxing centre has 30% of Napier residents utilising it or will have, and cricket 40%. So this money would be going to our people. It's just that the facility's not within our city boundaries. I don't think that means we shouldn't support it, particularly in light of the fact that we and PGA have been asking Hastings District Council to support PGA. So I think, we need to walk the talk. We say that we're working together regionally and we need to put our money where our mouth is.
May I speak to that again? I'm just wondering if we have $100,000 as the maximum amount we could give out today or in the next year for these projects. Could we just, if there's a figure of 30,000 put, could we just sort of park that while we look at the other requests for funding, if this is the fund that's going to be drawn upon?
We certainly can. I think it would be, I'm indicating if we say that there's a value that we're considering, and then as we work through the rest of the funding requests, we can adjust those figures. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So that being the case, we'll move on to the next funding request, which was the Cranford Hospice Foundation, and a request for $500,000. I have quite a different view for this because from my perspective, I don't see health as being one of our primary roles. Yes, we are responsible for the four wellbeings, but the provision of health services, and again, this is just my opinion that I'm offering, I believe at this point in time sits squarely with central government. So for that reason, I would not be prepared to support making a grant to the Cranford Hospice Foundation. Councillor Taylor.
I think I have previously spoken about this matter, and the reason I asked Chris about their status, that they are a charitable trust. There are a number of charitable trusts who provide aged care facilities in our region, and those charitable trusts don't come and ask the council for funding to build capital projects like dementia wings or rest homes, hospitals. And as Chris alluded in his conversation, a lot of those aged care facilities do provide palliative care because the hospice itself has very limited beds. They work in the community, I accept that, and provide a service to a lot of families, but as far as bed numbers, it is very, very limited, and their role is quite different. But we don't have other charitable trusts asking the council to fund their capital projects, so I cannot support it.
Is there anyone that feels differently around the table? Councillor McGrath?
No, I agree with that. It's not the council's role to build hospital wards for a better term. I certainly agree with Graham.
So if I can suggest that we, council resolve not to make a contribution. I'll change those words.
Hayley's got a hand up.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with your statement. I'm just looking at it from the interest of Hastings have already put forward $500,000 into this, and I just wondered if we had any indication of, we offered in-kind support in terms of the support for the gardens. Have we got any indication of how much value we have offered already?
Through you, Your Worship. So I don't have that to hand right now, but I can tell you that everything that you committed to in the long-term plan has been done. In particular, we'd have to go back a fair way, I think, because, 4 or 5 years ago, we did all the hazardous trees out there as well. So I think, we can definitely get those costs for you as to how much we have done, but perhaps it's better off saying that you have contributed a fair bit of in-kind support to the hospice, and that will be ongoing in terms of the care of those gardens once it's up and running.
So that was actually going to be my question. So we have committed to that ongoing support? Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah. And perhaps if we just note that in the resolution as well, that resolve not to make a contribution or a financial contribution to the construction of the new home for Cranford Hospice at this time, but commit to continued in-kind services for the gardens.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right. One done. Next, we have the Peter Grant, the Napier Positive Ageing Strategy Advisory Group, where the submission was asking for a full-time council employee dedicated to the positive ageing strategy and funding allocation for age-friendly projects. Noting there were no dollars attached to this, and that we do currently have a staff member, albeit it's only a part of their role, that is working with Peter and the advisory committee on the positive ageing strategy and the implementation. Is there any desire around the table to make changes to our annual plan to incorporate any additional funding, either for an FTE or for a project fund?
Could I suggest that perhaps Peter and the committee have a talk with the staff person about specific projects that they may want funding for? Because this is sort of a general request. I can see, exactly where he's coming from. I'm totally committed to the age-friendly concept as well. But I'm just wondering, before we look at a full-time employee, to work with the resources we've got and look at the action plan that's fallen out of the positive ageing strategy and just do it a step at a time and come back to council if extra funding's needed for that. Does that make sense?
And the other part to this council officer comments is that we are currently doing a review of our grants structure. So there may be an opportunity once that has been completed to redirect some funding as well. So I think the starting point for me is that we council note the feedback from the Positive Ageing Advisory Group, but resolve not to make any changes to the annual plan at this stage. And review council's grant structure, pretty much what you actually had there. Sorry, I marked the words around a bit.
You're just taking out part of it anyway, aren't you?
I'll just leave it as it was.
I'll leave it as
Yeah.
it is.
So, resolve not to make any changes to the annual plan in light of the work already taking place to implement the positive ageing strategy and review council's grants structure. And I think your recommendation there, Maxine, is covered off in the fact that we refer to the work that's already taking place. And so, yeah, the council officer is working through those priorities with the advisory group.
I think so.
So we've got Natasha online now just to talk to us about the community development grant for the Chinese Language Week and whether there is a requirement for that to be a local initiative to meet the grant criteria.
Kia ora, everybody. Through the Mayor. So just to confirm that there does need to be identification of community benefit being local community benefit. The applicant doesn't necessarily need to be a Napier-based organisation, but certainly we need to be clear that Napier residents benefit in some capacity.
Can I suggest then that we do resolve to assist the Chinese Language Week Charitable Trust in making an application, but that is also subject to the local Chinese Association supporting the grant application? The local Chinese Association supporting the application.
So, Your Worship, are we looking for the ability for them to provide the national body, for them to report back to us how that had an impact locally? Or where they're specifically involving our local organisations in any program?
No, I'm just suggesting that the grant application would be subject to our local association approving it, not necessarily that it would be for something specifically local to happen.
Okay.
But if they're supportive of the national campaign and supportive of us contributing $2,000.
Sweet. Couple. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, next up we have the CCS disability, where again we've been asked to specify or allocate some funding for disability strategy implementation specifically. And bearing in mind that there was a bit of an indication that perhaps it would need to be several $100,000 for it to actually be able to achieve anything meaningful. Councillor Crown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, this is really tricky because I think, you know, knowing the people around the table, we all want to see projects go ahead and for us to be as inclusive as possible. But at that sort of value, I can't see it being practical for us right now. But I think this relates to the positive ageing strategy also, is both of those submissions talked about like being really specific and applying their lens to our projects, etc. And especially Michelle Lucas referenced, you know, this is her recommendations were us, or prior to us actually embedding our policies, etc. And I'm wondering what tools we have available to us to make sure that those lenses are considered in every project. That, you know, what is our project management system? How is it allowing these things to be considered early on in the project so that the budget can be prioritised to include these things rather than having a standalone fund or a standalone budget specifically for these initiatives.
So, yeah.
Through you, Your Worship, potentially one of the things you could note through this process, as you do in many processes, is that there are a number of funding applications coming through, and that, you know, while we're doing a review of our funding grants at the moment, there may be a desire from councillors to direct officers to allocate more money to the Council Projects Fund for the coming year, and then that way is a way for councillors, Crown's question for us to really work with the applicants to make sure that those lenses are put over applications and are carried out in a way that we can work more collaboratively with them to get those in, potentially.
Thank you. So to me, that covers sort of external and applicant-driven, community-led type projects. But I'm just wondering what we do, how we can make sure that those lenses are applied on any of our internal projects.
Well, it is an incredibly difficult and also opportunistic challenge for you, given that your lens is the four wellbeings. So we can work to potentially make sure that there is more criteria put over the way that we assess things, but with that you lose your flexibility as well. So you really only have one fund, that Council Projects Fund, that does allow for some flexibility. So I think potentially it's something that we can continue to work with you on to make sure that that is answered to your satisfaction.
I think just to tease it out a little bit more, because what I'm hearing from Councillor Crown is in terms of our council BAU, how do we assess, so if we're putting in a new footpath, or what process do we have to assess that it's age-friendly and disability-friendly and that we're meeting the requirements that we need to meet?
Yeah, sorry for missing the mark on your question. Councillor Crown, probably didn't help that I was talking to my Director of Corporate Services at the time. Again, though, I don't think my answer is going to be as succinct as you want it to be, because again, I'll come back to the fact that there are many different criteria that need to be met, including affordability. But I do think that as we move through some of the strategies that you have on the table, of which, you know, your disability and our positive ageing and our multicultural policy and, you know, our te reo policy, they all add emphasis to us as to how we assess our works going forward. I think Natasha's digging me out of this hole.
I saw that her hand was up. Natasha.
Kia ora, through the chair. Just something to note, particularly with the disability strategy, is that we have convened an internal champions group that looks at the implementation of that strategy. And one of the things that we look at is particularly new projects and retrofitting projects, and how we can increase accessibility into those projects. So that is right at the beginning. And we have previously talked to the infrastructure team about adding a component, a consideration in the project management tool that we have to ensure that we do check that through when particularly a new project, so that funding can be allocated. And often it's not actually an extra cost, it's just a different way of looking at or implementing that project. So we are fully aware of how we can embed this awareness internally, and the Champions Group is working really well in the disability strategy, and positive ageing components are also part of that. So I think we are working on that, and I think you will see improvements as that strategy gets implemented.
For the Chair, the disability strategy is embedded in the design brief for the new library in Civic, and one of the Natasha's champions is on that project group.
Could I just thank you very much for that. Yeah, just responding to the last couple of comments, I'm sure many are fully aware that these strategies and these considerations and lenses are taken into consideration, but it may be that others out there in the community are not so aware. So it might be helpful to publicise the fact that we are looking at these projects with these particular lenses. And the other point I wanted to make is with our strategies, disability strategy and positive ageing strategy, it's great for us to have them. We did a lot of consultation, a lot of tweaking, and they're there now. But it seems that apart from some staff resourcing, which is not small, they're unfunded. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity perhaps next year or the long-term plan or whatever for some distinct funding be made available through that long-term plan, annual plan process to fund some of the activities that those two strategy groups are pushing for, advocating for.
Through the Chair, just in response to that, there is funding available through our operating budgets for some of the activities through the implementation, through our strategy development budget, also some of our project funding internally. So one of the ideas through the strategy has always been to use existing budgets where possible, but certainly for the bigger projects and particularly new initiatives, come to Council through the budgeting processes to enable us to support those projects as well. So thank you.
So if Council note the feedback from CCS Disability but resolve not to make any changes to the annual plan in light of the work already taking place to implement the disability strategy and review Council's grants structure. Next we have the submission from Frederick Puriri, which was the Paltia sculpture with Māori nature patterns. Frederick was due to submit today but was unable to make it, and I'm not sure if any council officers will actually know if the dollar value that was being sought for this installation. We've been advised by council officers that the council's city vision budget could be utilised, but that at this point in time it would require a reallocation from existing identified projects. Would something like this qualify for any of the creative arts funding grants or anything like that? Is there any other process available to apply for art installation type?
Through the Chair, there is some public arts funding through the arts policy budget within the community services budgets. I'm not aware of the amount that we're talking about. It has got a fairly limited allocation, but it could be potentially a joint funding situation if the proposal was supported by Council.
And Sarah, what was the name of that actual
It's just called Arts Policy, but it has funded murals and other public art installations in the past.
Okay.
It only has an allocation of around $50,000 per annum.
Councillor Crown.
Thank you, through the Mayor. It struck me when I was reading Frederick's submission of the synergy that it sort of, I felt it had with the Ahuriri Rotary Group one as well. And I wonder whether we can, in our comments back to the submitter, perhaps suggest connecting them up, because it seems like a good fit for both of them, regardless of funding available, etc. But what he was suggesting, and then that brings in that element of mana whenua, tangata whenua too, that Councillor Tapene raised when the Rotary Club did their submission.
We certainly could, although I think the Rotary submission was suggesting we fund. I know.
It's always nice when you can't quite do something that someone wants you to, though, but you can say, here's a buddy for you maybe to work with, you know?
Absolutely. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Mawson.
I just wanted to acknowledge Frederick's submission, and you know, there are some people that still come to grips with Te Reo, and he put in some translations in there in English. So I just wanted to acknowledge that was nice of him to do that.
Okay, so if I can suggest that council support the creation of a sculpture in principle and direct officers from the council's city design team into Wakarangapu to meet with Mr. Puriri and discuss his ideas, to investigate funding for the sculpture to come from the arts policy, and introduced Mr. Puriri to the Rotary Ahuriri Sunrise. Is that, yeah.
Didn't have any pictures of any of it, did he?
In terms of wording, that's not actually committing us, because I don't want to commit us to actually doing it. So can we just check the wording that it's just to investigate the possibility, or
Investigate possibility funding. Yeah. Investigate possible funding.
Yeah.
Held higher premium.
We haven't given $1 million to the sport plan?
And so the next submission is similar, I guess, in many ways, the Peace Po installation. Which, based on the presentation given to us today, I wouldn't anticipate this would require a significant amount of funding and could potentially be absorbed within a existing operational budget.
Get a few old fence posts.
Anyone feel any differently? No.
You know, I thought that the concept itself has got huge potential for a lot of other community groups to be able to participate in that type of expression. And if that were to eventuate, then that would also open up avenues of funding as well.
Okay. So again, it's that council supports the installation of a Peace Po. Which would be the most appropriate team to work with Ms. Remiswell on this one?
Oh, it'd be Ms. Stewart for sure.
Infrastructure.
And direct officers from the infrastructure team?
Is that the city design team?
I'm happy to lead the singing.
The infrastructure.
Oh,
To leave the singing.
did you want that in the resolution, Councillor Price?
Brave indeed.
Did we decide where?
Councillor Price agrees.
So we talked about the War Memorial site as well.
I think we will leave that for Ms Stewart and Ms Remerswell to come up with some recommendations to bring back to us.
Could I put another recommendation for a possible place for it, just on the table? And that's the cathedral. Outside the cathedral, there is the Environment, Peace and Justice group, which is very active from that cathedral. It is a central place in town, gets quite a lot of foot traffic past there. So just when the discussion is being held with Ms Remerswell, to ask if that would be, I think that would be better than Clive Square, which it would sort of be lost amongst the trees there, I think. Just a suggestion.
And that funding for the installation is to be found from council's operating budget.
Funded one. Yeah. You dig a hole and bang it in, I think.
I'll sing for free, that'll keep the cost down.
I didn't say infrastructure's budget, I said council's.
Don't be pushed around, Deb. Poor old infrastructure, eh?
Just wouldn't mind knowing auditors
break
and
might
risk's
be.
opinion on your offer.
And next we had the submission from the Ahuriri Sunrise Rotary Club for the reserve land in front of East Pier. And essentially, based on the costings presented today, they would be seeking, my interpretation was approximately $100,000. Was that what was up on?
I wasn't sure if the 68 was on top of that.
Oh, was that on top of that? Right, okay.
So, through the chair, are they not looking to fund that? Because they seem to have funded a lot of things themselves in the past.
No, my understanding is this particular project, they were seeking council funding.
Okay.
Councillor Price and Councillor Taylor.
Could we, no, they're wanting funding through the annual plan, but could we perhaps put some seeding fund in to assist them getting started?
We could, out of the council project fund.
Yeah, just to give them a bit of help to get going. It is a facility that, it's a facility that will be used by all of Napier. So it's yeah, thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
I think I know the answer, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. But the Rotary Pathways Trust donated $600,000 to the trust, to the council, the balance of the funds that haven't been used for the pathway development. I know there is some money of that has already been allocated to the pathway around the base of Dolbell, the linkage, but perhaps there may be some funds that could come from that Rotary donation to assist another Rotary project.
It's a fabulous suggestion. Ms Stewart, do you know if there's any funding that will be remaining from that $600,000?
Oh, gone.
Through you, Your Worship, I think it's largely committed, and I think if we were to use that on an alternative project, we need to go back to the Rotary Trust, which are no longer
Dissolved.
operational. I don't think they'd be very excited about us just deferring it to an alternative project.
I think it was gifted under terms.
Through you, Your Worship, can I make a suggestion that we work really closely with Ahuriri Sunshine Rotary Club to undertake further feasibility and potential consultation? And then that may lead us to being able to make an application to the Council Projects Fund further down the track.
Yeah, I'd support that through you, Your Worship, because, noted there were probably a few undeveloped parts to the concept around the safety issues. So
And
that
following on
well.
from that, we just had a workshop about that whole area.
Yeah,
So
I
they've
was just gonna
already,
mention.
there's already a plan there. So how does it fit in with that plan? I think that would need to be, Go Richard.
Yeah, through the Mayor, you're bang on. So the Inner Harbour work that we brought to you was we had a look at that area specifically as a priority, if you'll remember. So I think that will come through to you as an agenda item too in the next round, in this round. And I think what probably needs to happen is, because the funding for all of that area, all of those initiatives is pretty scratchy, to be honest. And what we are trying to do is cement some commitment to some of these things going forward into the next LTP. So this probably needs to be part of that conversation going forward, and the rock pools and all those things, so that we actually are, cohesive with it. But at the same time, I think it's important not to get in the way and say, well, we have to wait for this and we have to wait for that. So I think it's about working with them, but also trying to be a little bit strategic going forward.
It's the last word. Just to add to that, we are working with the Ahuriri Rotary Club and installing a barbecue there, which we've been working with them for several years, and we have got the two Rotary Clubs to kind of agree conceptually about what's happening in that area. So the barbecue, we think we can progress without compromising future use of that site, so that we're cracking on with that one. That's Ahuriri Rotary.
Thank you. So I could suggest, Councillor McGrath.
Yeah, sorry, just something that's come to mind was, and I'm sure council officers will be able to deal with it as they move forward with this, is the concept plan during storm time would actually perhaps rebury this ship, maybe because it's the tide has come in past that area in the past when we've had storms. So these sort of practicalities need to be added in by our reserves team and infrastructure team if they've got time in between singing.
Councillor Brown.
Pretty much happy with where the conversation's heading. Just wanted to say that I think this is a great project and it would be a real asset to that location, and keen to see us help them through the next steps, and then have a look potentially in terms of creative ways in terms of how we could facilitate this, whether it retains a Rotary project and we help support them, maybe with some funding, or whether we take it in-house, or whatever comes out of that. But keen for us to help with the feasibility for this next step in the first instance.
Feasibility means money.
Okay, so if I can suggest that council note the ideas shared by the Ahuriri Sunrise Rotary Club for the reserve land in front of East Pier, and resolve to undertake further feasibility of the project and how it aligns to our plans for the area.
Through your worship, we probably don't need that last bit, if I may, because it will be undertaken in the feasibility, against all of the other plans that we have for the area. But you may want to potentially foreshadow that there might need to be some consultation on it, but we could leave that for later too, now that I've said it. Yeah.
So just keep it, undertake further feasibility of the project, full stop.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, is that a feasibility study or just using the word in its general sense? Because I know feasibility study means money.
Through you, Your Worship, general.
Internal process, internal feasibility study.
I think what we're trying to signal is, look, we acknowledge it's not in the Te Karaka plan or the Inner Harbour plan, but we also acknowledge that they've done a lot of work on it, Councillor Bogue, so it's worthwhile undertaking feasibility discussions with them to see if we can, bring, I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the original discussion was to see if we can bring a council projects funding application back. So we would work with them to get the information required for that.
Just, I suppose, a conversation around setting expectations, bearing in mind that the total funding that they're requesting would exceed our available budget in the Council Projects Fund for the timeframe we're probably talking about. Is it worth in the resolution setting expectations that we may be open to funding at a future stage, but our expectation would be that there'd be some kind of contribution coming from other parties, more a discussion than anything else. I think it's unlikely that we would fund 100% of it.
That's right. So I'm just trying to think of the words to wrap around that. Noting that council would consider
Contribution.
a contribution, yeah.
Yeah, in part.
In part.
In future.
In future.
And I'm sure the officers can wrap some nice words around the response letter for how that's written to them, looking at Laura.
All good for that? Yeah. Cool. Next, we had Roger Headley and submission on illuminating the Spirit of Napier statue, which I think sounds like a fabulous idea, but I imagine would potentially be quite expensive. Do we have any sense of what a project like that may?
Are we open to a solar panel hat for her?
We could, we do have an officer's comment about this could be considered in the future as part of the reserve management plan process.
Good answer.
So we note the feedback that the Spirit of Napier statue should be illuminated, but this is not a priority at this time. It could be considered in the future as part of the reserve management plan process.
Through you, Your Worship, sorry, Deputy Mayor. Was that
I was just saying our wording could potentially be stronger in that we support the concept, but see that the reserve management plan is the place to develop that further. Sorry.
Through you, Your Worship, I think that through the reserve is going to be complicated. I mean, I think what I'm hearing from you is that you support that in principle, so you'd be directing us to go and figure out how much that might cost. Investigate further. Deb, can I just, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, lighting things on reserves is never as straightforward as you might think it is, and it will be particularly expensive down there with the water and what have you. We've got quite a lot of money to spend on that fountain. We can certainly contemplate it, but we probably would need to engage with the neighbours around that area as well, just a bit to think about there. I'm loath to put a figure on it, but I'm thinking we're probably about $100,000.
So, noting that we've said in the current wording this is not a priority at this time, are you suggesting that by then saying it would be considered in the future as part of the reserve management plan process that we're committing to?
I think what we do if we, and that management plan won't be done for a couple of years, but it would be an idea that we could float as part of that process and see what level of support there was for it. And at that point, we can ask some questions now in terms to get a sense on how much it's going to cost. Probably just not our first priority down there.
No, I agree. And I think that if it's still a couple of years off as being part of the reserve management plan process where we could sort of go out and canvass the community, I'm quite comfortable with that sort of time frame without committing to doing anything right now. Okay. Leave it as it is, And next we have the Aotea Rangi Educational Trust submission, which was also supported by Ngāti Kahanunu for the waka and the installation of a floating pontoon. So the cost indications that they've provided as part of their submission is 300 to 350,000. Have council officers been involved in that costing process at all? Do we know?
Through the chair, yes, we have been actively trying to get a grant from the Tourism Infrastructure Fund. Haven't heard the result of that yet. But also, as you'll recall from the workshop, we really need to start at the back of the iron pot first to be able to put the floating pontoon in. So unless they go in, you know, have something in its current place where it is currently to do that. So this needs to be unbundled quite a lot with around how this works, and we are proposing to actually send more information to you at, around the options for the Waka on fencing off that area, the pontoon concept, and then at final destination as well in the Iron Pot.
Thank you. Bearing in mind that the Trust have indicated that fencing off, in their opinion, isn't actually going to provide the protection that's required for the Waka, and that they have suggested if it wasn't relocatable to around the Iron Pot side, which is where the Waka will eventually end up, it was an option to leave it where it is and potentially hire it out and generate revenue. So I'm interested in hearing thoughts on that. And is you, yeah, in the same vein, Councillor Price?
Yes, yes. So I think they're confused in that when they do their drawings, the pontoon is the same that they want down where it is now to the pontoon that would go into the Iron Pot, and that why can't you do that pontoon now and take it down there? And then they've been told that the pontoon's different, so they need that explained, and they can't understand that.
I think they don't understand why it can't be moved, but they've also said, well, if it can't be moved, then it could just be left there.
There's a bit of confusion in there.
Used by others.
Yeah.
So.
Through the chair, I think the biggest problem with the pontoon is that it still needs to have a consent to put a pole or poles into the bottom of the channel, and that's quite a major deal. So I think what we need to do is have some good communication with them as to those options in the first instance. I think this is one that we really have to unravel a little bit to get it right. Otherwise, dollars to donuts will put it in the wrong place.
Okay, and so further to that, in terms of our option of installing security fencing, do we currently have budget to accommodate that? Where would we be funding that from if that was the pathway that we went down?
No, sorry, through you, Chair. To my knowledge, there's no funding set aside for that. There are some money set aside for the Iron Pot and particularly stabilisation of that wall there as a first priority. But I think that work was thought about in that TIF application, but not the first option.
Councillor Crown.
Did our TIF application include letters of support or appendix from Ngāti Kahungunu and the Waka Trust by any?
Yes.
Pretty sure it did Kahanu as well. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. And forgive me for putting you on the spot, Richard, but when is the TIF announcements due? I can look it up myself. It's not far off. So potentially there's an opportunity to, note the request and note that there is some further feasibility work to be done, and then subject to the application, confirm timing and costing.
My understanding the TIF application was for the pavilion, not for the...
That is correct, but it's all part of the unbundling of what we need to do there.
Okay.
And, sorry, Mayor-wise, through you, further to that, it dictates the timing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I suggest then that we keep this fairly high level at this stage? We note the request to improve security. Leave it in here, I'm just not reading it. Council, note the request to install a floating pontoon to improve security for the Wakamura and West Quay, and direct officers to continue discussions with the Trust as to an interim solution for the security issues. Everyone happy with that?
Yep.
So direct officers to continue,
Note, council note the request, yep.
leave all of the,
Leave all the drop.
yeah. We'll get to direct officers.
Well, that's in the next one.
Yeah, it's the second one. Yeah.
Just, would it be possible, sorry,
To continue discussions with the trust to find an interim solution to the security issues.
and leave everything up the top as well?
Yes, so remove the first option completely and then,
Sorry, so I've got council note to install the. No, so you want me to take out?
so it should have been the second one.
Direct officers, oh, so you wanted them, through security for the worker, audit is key, and then take that out, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And direct officers.
Yeah. Cool, thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'm just wondering if we could ask if the officers could let us know how they get on or keep us posted and Wakarangapu on how this discussion is proceeding.
I think that's a given, councillor Bogue.
Good, thanks.
Cool, thank you. Next.
Your Worship, so before we roll off on that one, just by connection, there was an expression made by Dr. Smith around there seems to be a communication barrier there, so when they unpack that work and they could take particular note of their comms and where that frustration is coming from, because otherwise that'll lead to distortion.
Noted, thank you. Next, we had the West Shore Residents and Development Association, where they were predominantly asking, there was, I think, 3 key parts to their submission, wanting some additional gull-proof bins or replacing the old ones with some gull-proof bins. I think there was six bins they were looking to have replaced. I think we can accommodate that, can't we?
Through you, Chair, we'll remove the old green bins that we were requested to kind of have a look at immediately. Probably tomorrow if our City Services Department have anything to do with it. And then we're having a bit of trouble with some of those gull-proof bins, people flogging the lids on them, but we'll look to install some of those, and we're also trialling a compacting bin at Ahuriri, so once we've got a sense of that, we may include that as part of the playground. So pretty confident we can deal with the bin issue.
Excellent, thank you. So,
Just by extension, Your Worship, would love to find out from our depot team whether or not those gull-proof bins are actually gull-proof at all. Some feedback from our team on how effective they are would be wonderful as well, thanks.
Oh, Richard should know.
and the other 2 components that they specifically requested in this submission was the seating and planting at the Charles Street shops, which are of course private landlords. Councillor Taylor?
I would like to have seen a sort of a graphic of where they were going to put that seating, because
Yeah, there's not.
I mean, I know that shopping pretty well, having lived straight across the road for a while, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of area where you could actually put chairs
No.
or seating, so I'd like to,
And it would really need to be the responsibility of the shop owners there.
yeah, I know it gets robbed a bit.
I think, just in fairness, one of the reasons was it's been suggested that they use seating as a barrier to protect ram rates rather than putting a wall in. I think that might mean a bit of unfolding.
Perhaps as the representative on this association, Councillor Price, you could have that conversation with the committee to approach the shop owners and tenants there to have some chairs installed.
Oh, Councillor Brown.
Certainly.
Excuse me, through you, Madam.
Councillor Brown, you have your hand up.
I was just thinking, is the type of seating that we already have outside, is it outside Portofino and the one in Market Street outside Drop Shot? I wonder whether that would be appropriate to go in there and like what processes we have if in our existing processes and funding for something like that to happen.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the parklets, which I suggest would take up the bulk of the parking space available in front of the shops, so might not be particularly practical.
I'll follow it up.
We'll leave that in your capable hands, Councillor Price.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I also heard him suggest he's quite happy to look at maybe having less bins too. So perhaps we don't need 6.
What are we talking about?
Well, we'll leave that in the city services team's hands. And then the final request was the 30 km/h speed signs outside West Shore School, which has in fact already been resolved with council, and we're simply waiting for the arrival of those signs, and that will be implemented. So really the only remaining action is just putting some words around direct officers to upgrade to gale-proof bins. Review and upgrade the bins. We just call them the bins. Rubbish bins. At West Shore Beach. It's the beachfront area, isn't it?
Yeah,
They're referring to.
it may also pay to mention the fact that we're cutting our numbers of rubbish tins down.
I'm sure we can include that in the letter back to them. We won't
Just
have
so
to include it
I
in
don't
the
have to tell them.
That's what he did.
He already said he was okay with it.
Will you speak up? Can't lip read, mate.
He's got his irrigated, age-friendly strategy.
Too busy singing.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor.
Right.
Excuse me, sorry.
Your Worship.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, sorry. Just, the other part of that submission though was around art, wasn't it? So can we let them know what funding is available for them to be able to make an application to, wasn't it for murals?
Murals, yeah.
Murals, yeah.
We can suggest that
Yeah.
they
Painting post boxes and art for you guys. Some candles and stuff.
I think we'll just include it in the letter. We'll include that in the letter, yeah. Okay, we'll do another 15 minutes and then we'll take a break.
We did.
In terms of sort of funding requests as well, there was also the Sport Hawke's Bay, which was a little bit unclear from the written submission what they were seeking, but from the questions asked, there is, I believe, a desire, if we would like to do it, to give some additional funding so they can extend their healthy schools cycling programs to cover more schools here in Napier, whether that be through a internal resource, which sounds like what Hastings District Council does, or whether it would be a financial contribution to Sport Hawke's Bay to increase their resourcing. So I'll open that up for discussion.
Through you, Your Worship, I don't want to speak either in favour. I just would like to explain that the Healthy Active Learning program, there is funding and they are employing staff for that. However, I think the Cycle Skills program is significantly less visible in Napier than it is in Hastings, and they would like to see a greater equality between the two and have more schools involved in the Cycle Skills program.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And again, just tapping into your knowledge, would that be better achieved by us having an internal resource, or by us actually just giving a set amount of funding to Sport Hawke's Bay to enable them to do that?
Well, I'm sure Natasha will, we already have a service agreement with Sport Hawke's Bay, so I believe it could be part of a review of that current service agreement.
Through the Mayor, yes, we do have a service agreement with Sport Hawke's Bay. However, just to note that all of the service agreements were reviewed last year in terms of allocating funding to those. So any additional funding would need to be sourced potentially through the Council Projects Fund. if you were to award them some additional funding for that program. And just a point to note, I haven't seen the, I wasn't there for the submission, but is that an ongoing funding requirement? And if so, the Council Projects Fund is a one-off grant. So the earliest we could look at the funding agreement, the service agreement, would be alongside the LTP next round.
Thank you. Chief Executive.
Through you, Your Worship. So I think I need to fess up on this one that it is an area that we have dropped the ball in somewhat. We started a number of discussions with Sports Hawke's Bay about tailoring their program for scooters. We felt that there was really strong alignment with council-owned Baysgate, as well as a lot of our children that currently scoot, and we felt that there were barriers to purchasing a cycle that didn't exist with scooters, as well as storing, etc., etc. So we kicked off a program that was going to be looking at a number of different aspects, including our children in emergency housing, and unfortunately it's not something that we have brought to a close. So back to answer Councillor Taylor's question, with that in mind, it is probably better if you are considering to bring more prominence to this program, firstly doing that through a service agreement through operating funds to Sport Hawke's Bay rather than having an in-house resource. I think we haven't been able to bring this one to a close just because of a number of different priorities. And secondly, I think it would need to come from operating budget as opposed to an external grant, or an internal grant, just because of the ongoing nature of it.
And sorry, just to tease that out a little bit further in terms of aid, do you have a sense of a dollar value for that? That would.
I think it's as big as we can afford, to be honest, with respect to how we grow that. I mean, ultimately what we want to do, particularly in the year to come, is make sure that the program's successful and build from there. I'm not sure, Glenn, if you have anything on hand about the dollar figures for the, no.
Councillor Taylor, do you know what they currently receive from the actual program?
Not for the whole program that's funded from central government, no. But that's mainly for the educators who will now work with within each school for that healthy active learning, and the Cycle Skills program will only be a sub piece of what they're doing within each of those 40 schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel if we want to resolve today to allocate some operational budget to increase the number of schools that we're able, or Sport Hawke's Bay are able to support, we need to tag a dollar value to that.
If I may, through you, Your Worship, we will attempt to get that before you come back after your break.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Tell you, but I can't.
Okay, so I think this is the last funding type request. It was from the Napier Old Boys Marist Cricket Club for a new cricket pitch at Park Island between the two rugby fields. Council officer advice has been that there was actually already an alternative location that had been specified in the master plan for Park Island for where additional cricket pitches would go. So does anyone support exploring further this request for a cricket pitch in this location?
Can I just say, Madam Mayor, that I think this again affirms the need for a regional sports facilities overview, stocktake, needs, sort out what needs are and how they're going to be met. So otherwise we're going to be getting ad hoc, occasional and probably quite worthwhile requests for various sports facilities, but if we don't have that overall picture, then they stand unconnected and not necessarily supported by the rest of the region.
Councillor Price.
Just bearing in mind, we've okayed for Central Football to do a review of where they move there. And I'm not sure whether this is in the same place or what, but it probably all ties in.
Yeah.
Through you, Your Worship. My understanding for this submission is they were looking to put it in between the two fields in the Tremaine fenced area.
Oh, okay.
That's my understanding. I hope I've got that right. And we're thinking that the cricket, there's a number of cricket pitches where Councillor Price has referred to where we're now looking at that soccer. So that might change that, but I'd be very reluctant to include a wicket in the fenced area. I know why they want to do it, but would be a significant change in the level of service in there.
So can we then, council, note the suggestion from the Napier Old Boys Maris Cricket Club for a new cricket pitch at Park Island, but resolve not to make any changes to the annual plan as this is not a priority at this time?
Yep.
Okay, and we'll do quickly one more, I think, before our break, which was from the Taradale Residents Association,
100,000.
requesting that they're involved in the Taradale Town Hall refurbishment and strengthening of the Taradale Plunket Rooms. And I think this one's a pretty easy one that we just, note the request and that they have already been identified as a key stakeholder for these projects. Exactly the wording we've got. Okay, yeah, don't change it. Right, so we will take a break now just for 10 minutes, which means we'll be back at 3 minutes past 3. 3 minutes past 3 minutes. Back everybody, we will get back underway and just returning to the Sport Hawke's Bay submission and the cycling education for tamariki, and I would like to suggest that we actually note the request to support Sport Hawke's Bay cycling education program and direct officers to find additional funding from existing operational budgets. We won't tag a dollar value to it at this stage, just while we do some further analysis around what that might look like in terms of the schools and the need.
Happy with that?
Yep. That brings us to Alan White's submission around the lack of engagement and strategic planning for transport, unsafe roads for cycling. And I think in terms of the current annual plan, we resolved not to make any changes to the annual plan, noting that we have tagged additional funding for Sport Hawke's Bay for cycling education for tamariki. And that the work that is already taking place on the finalisation of the transportation strategy. Councillor Bogue.
Could I just add the suggestion that Mr. White has got a lot of experience in cycling, having cycled from North Cape to bottom of the South Island yesterday, and is very interested in council and cycling around the city. And I'm wondering if there's some way we could perhaps direct our officers to have a chat with him or engage with him if there's any kind of opportunities for consulting with cyclists on particular issues.
Your Worship, I spoke with Alan after his submission, and will continue to link with him, as he would be a person that we would invite to be part of the Regional Active Transport Committee, which that new governance structure is still being put together. And I believe the paper will go to the Regional Transport Committee in their June meeting. And so if that structure changes, then people like Alan will be invited to be part of that Active Transport Committee.
Okay, great.
Can I just check? Can I just check that we've got it right, that we want?
Yeah, that's fine. And I think, are you happy, Councillor Taylor, if we just include that as the part of the letter to him as opposed to forming part of the resolution?
Yep.
Mayor Wise. One of the things that Alan raises in his submission, which I think is a really good point, is that kind of separation needed from carriageways for cycling. And I'm just trying to get straight in my head, at what stage does council have a strategic conversation around the future of the networks? Is that best done through the Regional Transport Committee, or is that a strategy document or a policy guidance we're giving to our own transportation team? I'm just trying to, in my head, figure out what the best place to have that discussion is.
Through you, Your Worship, can I please have a dollar each way and say both? Because really, you know, from the more recent emissions trading scheme policy statements our government's made right through to our Regional Transport Committee, and then we have to Napierise it. So I do think if, you know, the bulk of the answer is at that regional working group level, but we need to be constantly thinking about our own ability to provide some Napier-based solutions, and we do have a lot of opportunity to do that. So I think the answer is both, unfortunately, or fortunately.
So could I just ask an example question of that? The work that we're doing on the Paraiti Road, or the Puketitri Road out past Paraiti, is that it's in design stages now and feasibility, we were looking at land holdings, etc. Is that something where we are going to, how would we say that's a project that we need to future-proof by having enough space for off-carriage cycle?
So I might hand that one over to Deb Stewart, please.
Through you, Your Worship, the team are asked all the time to consider the links, the cycling opportunities, but I think we've got some work to do in that area. I don't think we're as good as we have been in the past for some reason about including cycling opportunities and walking opportunities through those strategic links. So I'm happy to go back and talk to the team and work out, and certainly happy to engage with Alan and take his knowledge on board as we work through that. That's a no answer in a funny way.
Would you like to include something additional in the resolution to capture that?
No, I'm just looking for, I suppose, us to have that conversation at a governance level somewhere as part of our strategy around how the future of our cities networks will look. And I don't think it's appropriate on a project by project basis necessarily, but some sort of guidance from governance around what we want you to be looking at when you're in design stages. But I think, Deborah.
Sorry, through you, Your Worship, I can add again, we'll bring the transportation strategy to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the right place for the governance guidance on that issue.
Yeah, I agree. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, exactly the example that the Deputy Mayor has talked about is why we're looking at changing the structure so that we have local body active transport committees who can be involved at a local level in development, that then is a regional governance group who will have a voting seat at the Regional Transport Committee, so that policy can be developed that at all times when developments and changes are made, that it is active transport is taken into consideration as one of the things that needs to, because at the end of the day, the more cars we get off the road, less emissions, all of those climate change aspects. So that's why we're going through this change process.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Your Worship.
Councillor Tumpney.
So I agree with the line of reasoning and where we were landing on this korero. I just wanted to ask, probably Debs, whether or not the transport strategy was the best place for me to get an understanding of the conditional assessment of our footpaths, because he almost also made reference to, other than cyclists using the carriageway, the condition of the footpaths was also highlighted in the submission. Would the transport strategy be the best place for me to get an understanding of its asset condition and any schedule of work that we have over time?
Through you, Your Worship. No, the best place for that information is in the asset management plans. And the transportation team store all their data in a roading asset management system, and that's where that condition assessment work is done.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to the conclusion of the more individual submissions. So we'll swing back now to the Mitre 10 Park. We do currently have, that's the only submission now that there is a call on the council project fund. And I would like to suggest that we allocate 50,000 out of our council project fund. I've also been advised by the Chief Executive that they are in a position where they will be able to identify some savings within the existing budgets to enable us to increase our council project fund to 200,000 per annum to give us some more flexibility for the remainder of the year for any other applications we may receive.
It's all right, it's only annual.
So the initial part of that, just seeking your feedback on the $50,000 allocation to the Mitre 10 Park to support the boxing club and cricket club. Councillor Mawson.
Yep, I support.
Agree.
Anyone not in support?
I support.
Richard.
I support.
Your hand's not up. Councillor Crown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm supportive, but I think I might just hand over to Councillor Taylor to explain why I'm so supportive, because I think there's some clarification that's required around the $1 million that we allocated during the long-term plan last year.
The officer's comments in the paper are actually incorrect. because we have not given $1 million to the regional sports park. We gave $1 million to the Hawke's Bay Community Fitness Trust, who is responsible for building the pool. And that's why I have at length or various times tried to explain to you that there are two trusts that operate at that piece of land. And the Hawke's Bay Community Fitness Trust is the one building the pool, and that is who we donated or gave the $1 million to. The Regional Sports Park Trust is the overall landlord, and we have not contributed to them in the past.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. So if we could just note that management comments need to be amended. And that for this particular item, Council resolved to include $50,000 of funding in the annual plan to support the construction at Mitre 10 Park. The funding contribution is to come from Council's Projects Fund. And then, because I've brought it up, we will be adding an additional part to the resolution that Council direct officers to fund an additional $100,000 to the Council Project Fund from operating efficiencies.
Where is that recommendation going? That's not in the sports park, though, is it?
No, that's a separate one.
So where do you want me to put
Perhaps put it at the bottom of the ones that are part of the council paper itself. So now we'll move to the more generic sort of items that came through in the submissions, one or more submissions. So we had a number of submitters bring the Aquatic Centre onto the agenda today. And I'd just like to propose, that covered off a number of areas around accessibility. There was support for the proposed injection over the next 2 years of funding, request for further consultation on the pool development, and I'd just like to suggest we cover off, in terms of the council resolution, that we note the feedback from submitters about the current Napier Aquatic Facility and the proposal for redevelopment, but resolve not to make any changes to the annual plan in light of the work programs already underway. Happy with that?
Yep.
Yep.
Sorry, excuse me, Madam Mayor. Just so each of the submitters get a letter, don't they?
They do.
Yeah. Can we make sure that the letter to Carol Ann Gard outlines the funding that we put aside for Unikawa and note that that does include an upgrade to the hoist?
And there will be a group of myself and a couple of councillors that review all those letters before they're sent out. Are you volunteering?
No, I did last time.
You're very good. You've got experience in it now.
Right, next we had some submissions that spoke around climate change that weren't necessarily directly linked to the coastal hazards consultation item. So this was around the need to action to combat climate change, suggestion to deprioritise cars from the CBD, and general concerns and questions about coastal erosion. And I'd like to suggest that we resolve council note the feedback regarding climate change and intends to release a statement of intent about climate change in 2022. And council notes it has already resolved to develop a climate change strategy and work is underway.
Yeah, I think that was the right answer. Halfway down the track.
Okay, and then we also had some submissions regarding water, feedback on Three Waters and chlorination, and questions around Marewa in particular and protection against flooding. And I'd like again to suggest we include in the resolution, council note the feedback regarding Three Waters chlorination and stormwater improvements, but resolve not to make any changes to the annual plan in light of the work programs already underway. And I'd also like to add, we have had a specific request for a survey to be undertaken. So I'd like to include in this that council directs officers to undertake a survey to provide our community an opportunity to provide feedback on the Three Waters reform and the future and a future chlorine-free network.
Madam Mayor, could I ask a question? What sort of survey would that be? Is
So what we're
a
suggesting
referendum
we'll
or-
do is, you may recall we undertook a survey about halfway through last year. So we're actually intending to ask all the same questions that we asked last year to assess the, whether there's been any change, significant change in the way that our community feels about the reform. And that survey, again, you may recall, also spoke about our Hawke's Bay model and the community's level of satisfaction with potentially paying a little bit more to retain that local representation. So it'll be the exact same questions, but we will be adding some additional questions around chlorination specifically. But we want to be able to benchmark from that first chlorine that survey we undertook.
I'm just concerned there's a lack of sort of balanced information out there about the Three Waters reform, and a lot has happened since last year. And I just wonder that are we going to, be giving people adequate information to make some sort of assessment of, to answer the questions that we're sending out?
So we are about to launch at a regional level a campaign around informing, educating the whole of the Hawke's Bay community about both the government model, our Hawke's Bay model, and how they can engage in the select committee process. So I'm confident that through that process we will be providing our community with adequate and balanced information to enable them to feed back into our survey. Councillor Crystal.
Could there be a link in the survey to that consultation? If people don't actually see it, but they do the survey and think, I want to know more, some sort of link to that information that's going to go out, because not everyone sees everything all the time.
Through you, Your Worship, my strong advice would be that we keep the survey's questions the same as the survey questions which you have previously authorised. And my reason for saying that is it does actually provide us a really good benchmark. Back to Councillor Bogue's point about whether people have heard of Three Waters, their level of knowledge about it, and because if we keep the questions the same, we'll be able to provide some metrics as to if any views have changed. I think it is legitimate though that we add a couple of additional questions, but I wouldn't want our survey to be misinterpreted as a select committee process, or the fact that we might be making submissions to us as the same thing as engaging in the select committee process. So my view would be to keep them, to be very mindful of timing, but to keep them separate.
Okay. Now we do have another sort of overarching category that's covered off on submissions that again that have there might have only been one, but that have touched on other items that weren't part of the consultation document, such as inquiries about the Napier Library, a shopping centre in Te Awa, the opposition to the implementation of vaccine passes. So to cover all of these other areas, I'd just like to suggest we include in the resolution that Council has considered all other matters raised by submitters and considers no further changes are required to the annual plan other than those directed above, as a sort of final bullet point in the council resolution.
What about something like in there somewhere that while we appreciate the input and suggestions from the submitters, and then say what you're going to say, just to sort of say a thank you to them for submitting.
We will be thanking them individually in the letters they get sent.
So that resolution goes at the bottom of the main one, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'll just write at the very, very bottom of all of the.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I will get Carolyn to bring up on the screen all of the current recommendation, which will include what's in your agenda initially, and we'll work our way through those and then carry on and review the ones that we've formulated, just to confirm we haven't missed anything.
Parking meter thing.
So while Carolyn brings that up, I'll read out. So the officer's recommendation, point A, receive and consider all submissions made on the annual plan 2022-23 consultation document. B, note the community feedback regarding the proposal to transfer coastal hazards assets and budgets to Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and note that Council endorsed the Memorandum of Transition in December 2021. Note that Council has delegated authority to execute the Memorandum of Transition to the Chief Executive, and that has now been signed, hasn't it?
Last month.
Do we want to amend that to reflect that that has now been signed?
It's noted that it was delegated anyway.
Okay,
so
so that's fine.
But just for councillors to be aware that it has been signed.
Yeah. And part 3 of that is note that the proposal will only be implemented after Hawke's Bay Regional Council provide for the transfer in its long-term plan, planned to enable the transfer of assets from 1 July 2024. Part C, review management comments on topics raised by submitters that were not formal consultation items, and provide any direction where council wishes to action a suggestion from a submitter, noting that officers may need to work through funding implications. Do we need to keep that in there, considering we have essentially gone through all of those and now listed them separately? Don't need it. So C comes out. Now D, this is one we've got a slight change. Agree to the recommended rephasing of capital budget for the parking meter upgrade project to accommodate the timing of the project. So Adele, did you want to speak briefly to that?
Parking meters, sorry.
So yes, councillors were provided with some additional information requesting further funds to be brought forward for this particular project. So it's just noting that at the time when the information was being prepared, it was about the timing. So this is just confirming the additional, I think it's $200,000.
So the revised recommendation is agree to the recommended rephasing of $600,000 of capital budget for the parking meter upgrade project to accommodate the timing of the project.
Yes, thank you. Makes sense.
And E, agree to the recommended rephasing of the capital budget associated with the strengthening of the Memorial Square community rooms in anticipation of a partnership between Napier City Council and the Art Deco Trust to restore the facility, noting that the rephasing would result in a 0.03% rates increase for the 2023-24 year. F, note that the draft budgets for the annual plan 2022-23 do not comply with section 101 of the Local Government Act 2002, the balanced budget benchmark, and the projected operating revenues for 2022-23 do not cover the year's projected operating expenses as consulted on in the long-term plan 2021-31. Note that the proposed capital plan for 2022-23 remains an ambitious work program in a challenging COVID-19 climate in relation to supply chain, labour shortage and inflation. Note the significant initiatives for 2022-23 in the attached document, which form the basis for the Council's work program for the year. and direct officers to prepare the final annual plan 2022-23 in anticipation of adoption at the council meeting of 30 June 2022. And then I'll draw your attention up to the screen so that we can review the remainder of the resolution which has been formulated during the hearings today, that council direct officers to fund an additional 100,000 to the council project fund from operating efficiencies.
So we just note for that's for the annual plan 22-23.
My Director of Corporate Services would like you to put for 1 year, please.
For the annual
for this
plan
year.
2022-23.
That's correct.
In here.
Yeah.
And you might want to take out operating efficiencies.
Okay. And then if we scroll down, Carolyn, to the
rest of them.
To the rest of them, yeah.
Further up.
So the writing in red is the suggested resolution for each of these items. Rather than me sitting here reading them all out, we'll just take some time to read through them, and if anyone has any questions or concerns, just please let me know.
No, it shouldn't be not, that we're redirecting them to the Community Grants Fund.
Yeah, excuse me, through you, Your Worship, I don't think Council resolved not to support the application for the Chinese Language Week. Just reads quite strongly.
Yeah. So we're redirecting them to the Community Development Grant.
So what do you want me to put in there instead of the same?
Resolve to redirect officers.
That doesn't still resolve to direct officers.
Yeah.
Take out the next sentence.
We say subject to the local Chinese Association supporting the application up there somewhere.
Yeah.
Like that and take that out?
Yeah. Yeah, and then just include subject to at the start of that. Subject to the local Chinese Association supporting the application. Great. Okay. Council. Okay. Yeah. Let's scroll down. Commit in-kind service gardens.
So the in-kind service can refer to what was approved in the long-term plan.
As approved in the long-term plan 2021 to 31.
Would it be, and the review of council's grant structures? They note this and the review of.
Yeah, you'll need to replace
light.
the last one too, on the last paragraph. Didn't read right either. Just there.
Yeah, that's not
Conservation
right.
strategy and to review.
The council note the feedback, resolve not to make any changes.
And the review of council's grants structure.
Already taken place.
Observation and review council
Sorry,
grant
I'm
structure.
going to take out the 2, am I?
Make it a the. In light of, we've already taken those. Yeah, and the review of council's grant structure.
That's better.
And she says.
Put pop of in that one and that one.
Carers are looking after it.
Yep, great.
Stupidly today said, shall we bring them?
And
So,
in light of.
so they better ring me. She's obviously put something.
Don't understand.
What's she doing?
I just
Yeah.
thought that's where the call it comes from.
Yeah.
Rang me and spoke to the girl.
Come on, Greg, go help.
That's all right. Stay there.
When you come back now?
Yep, that's good. Gregor, you're too good.
Always plugging in.
I don't know that we need the but in that one, just resolve to. Just wordsmithing, I know, but.
I've run out of gas yet. No, 93%.
Yeah. Oh, no, sorry, I hadn't read that one yet. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Carolyn, can you go back to the Waka funding one? Because I don't think we've actually answered the question in there.
Mm. Sounds like. I think so.
Through you, Your Worship, perhaps it's direct officers to find an interim solution while ongoing discussions can be had about the long-term solution.
Whilst long-term planning continues.
Or solutions, whilst long-term solutions are investigated. I think ultimately we'll end up working with central government on this one.
Just add at the end of the sentence.
Oh,
here. Yeah.
Smaller one.
Whilst long-term solutions.
Are investigated.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in that one for Sport Hawke's Bay, it should be operational budget rather than operation.
Sounds like it.
I think it is. Sorry, I'll look at my camera.
Oh, Grego, you need to come and do Carolyn.
What have I done?
Come unplugged.
Oh.
Did you want to come to the Liminal Castle? Tickets, $200.
Where?
Liminal Castle,
Yeah. Are you going?
Yeah, we're going to group. 23.
What date is it? September?
It's the main,
It has now, yeah.
Yeah.
Goodness me. Hope you've been saving.
I'll take it.
Thanks, Grego.
I'll take it.
So I think it was just going back to operating subjects as opposed to operation under the Sport Hawke's Bay one.
Operating budgets.
Yeah.
Budget or budgets? Operating budget.
Okay. That one's fine.
Let me know.
No, that's all right. I'll have a year old there.
That doesn't read quite right.
2000? Because they have three.
This is the last one.
full stop after Tamariki.
This was the big one.
Yeah. There was one house, that one. And the one of Jamie Richards. But he'd see
out the but
Jamie
in
Richards
resolve.
and
Yeah.
Mark Walker.
And then maybe just, and in light of the work already taking place on the transportation strategy.
And he was training the horses and singing.
Potentially it's about making it clear that that's in draft and there will be further work to come on the transportation strategy, so more opportunities to engage.
Did I say draft
At the
transportation?
synthetic track.
Yeah, draft.
Note that the transportation strategy is still to be finalised or something.
Maybe a new sentence, there will be further opportunities to engage in the finalisation of the strategy.
Was back in races in Hong Kong.
I've got an extra thing here. Council officers under survey with the community. I've got an N in there. To provide.
Kristen, that B, how's that going to work? Are we going to do
It'll be an online.
just an online?
Yeah. As an opportunity to provide, just put an as in there, on Three Waters Reform and the future chlorine-free network.
Sorry, Carolyn, can we go back? The council directs officers to undertake a Three Waters reform survey.
Question, isn't it?
Will you take these en bloc?
I was going to do the whole lot together unless there's anyone.
Except there's one that you might just take out.
Yep, no, sorry, thank you.
Yep.
We're good.
So I'm intending to move this in block unless there's anything, having reviewed all of these now, if there's anything that any elected members are intending to vote against,
I would imagine
then we will take that separately. Councillor Brown, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a question that just came to me as we were reviewing those. I think it was Alan White's submission where he talked about the draft nature transportation document and how it wasn't published but it was referred to in multiple consultations. I just wondered if we could get some comment around what happened there and has that been resolved?
Through you, Your Worship, I'm not sure that I can answer that specifically, but I do know the draft transportation strategy is just about ready to come to you for endorsement. So I'm at a loss to understand where it was and why it was referred to if it didn't actually exist. But I can come back to you if that's helpful.
And perhaps we can cover that off when the draft strategy comes to us.
Will do.
Thank you. Okay, so having reviewed the full set of resolutions, elected members happy for me to move them all as a block? Or would you like me to move any of them separately? Councillor McGrath, I'm looking at you.
Well, seeing you've gone to all the effort, there's one I'd like separated out. I might as well be consistent.
And would that be the Mitre 10 Sports Park?
It just could be.
Excellent, okay. So I will put the motion excluding the Mitre 10 Sports Park.
Have you got a seconder?
Yes, I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
I can second that because I'm not involved in the other one.
That's true. So I will talk to it briefly. Thank you everybody for your participation today. Thank you for our submitters. I think it's we've reached a really good balance in terms of what we need to be doing over the coming year, and we have obviously proposed a 9.8% rates increase, and I think it would be foolhardy of us to have tried to continue with some of the low rates increases that we've had in the past, because it's simply unsustainable when we need to invest in our facilities and infrastructure. So I will pass across to Councillor Taylor if he would like to speak.
Your Worship, I'm quite happy with what you've got to say.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to talk to the motion? Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And then the Mitre 10 funding request, again, I'm happy to move that. If I could have a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Mawson. I don't wish to say anything further. Anything? No? From anyone else wish to speak to that? So all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Against.
Okay. Carried.
Abstention.
An abstention from Councillor Taylor. Thank you everybody for your efforts today, council officers, elected members, and as I said, everyone that's made submissions to our 2022-23 annual plan. If we could all please stand for our closing karakia. E tau te rangamarie, te runga i ngā iwi katoa o Ahiri, kia piki ora te kaha me māramatanga i ngā wā katoa, te mauri ora.